It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome back to the carousel with Konstantin von Hofmeister. What's up, man?
Hey, hello, how are you? Yeah, I'm glad to be back here.
Yeah, I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and you have a very funny cadence of how you introduce people and say things. You always say after somebody's done talking, you say to the other guest, "So, Sam von Freppenstein, what do you think of this?"
Well, it's
And
my
I've gotten
style from you.
yeah, it's your
Right.
you have a very interesting cadence. It's like you're kind of like half tongue in cheek, like carnival, like you're like, "So, my friends," but you're also very serious and very intellectual. So it's funny. Okay, well, so you have your show, which is Arctos, which has lots of great people on it, and you are the author of a new book. I think is this your second book or third book?
Well, my second book called
Okay,
Multipolarity. I guess you introduced
multipolarity.
the first one was esoteric Trumpism.
Yeah, which we've also talked about, but it's multipolarity, and it's multipolarity with an exclamation point in the end. So why does it have that?
Yeah, and all caps also,
And all
right? Because
caps.
yeah, it's all caps. Well, just to draw attention to what's important right now in the world, basically. Because in my opinion, like internationally speaking, on the world stage, nothing is more important than the rise of the multipolar world, which is happening right now in front of our eyes.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I had Dugan on my podcast, and we talked all about multipolarity. I understand what multipolarity is, and I've read most of this book. I got to the part about Decene, which I really want to talk about Decene, which I actually didn't talk about with Dugan. But I'm really fascinated by the idea of multipolarity. I think the people in the West have no idea about any of this. It's not even the more intellectual type Americans would have no. If I said to them, "What's multipolarity?" they would have no idea what I'm talking about. But I do think, like, fundamentally, the framework of it is basically correct. So why don't you tell us what it is? But basically, what I want to ask is, what's the difference with? Isn't multipolarity sort of deceptively simple? Isn't it really just saying it's not a hegemonic United States, global American, global homo empire? Isn't that basically what multipolarity is saying?
Well, basically, right. Like if you want to simplify it to its bare bones, maybe, but also not really, because you all had different systems. I would say, like, way in the past, you already had a multipolar world when you had ancient empires, like the Holy Roman Empire in
Yeah,
Europe. In the Middle
exactly.
Ages, you had China. Yeah, before that, you had Byzantium, you had Rome and Carthage, etc. Uh, I would say that after World War II, so starting in 1945 with the defeat of Nazi Germany, the world was divided into two, right? Two camps. You had the Western camp, the so-called democratic camp, led by the United States with NATO, and then you had the Eastern camp, the socialist camp, led by the Soviet Union. You had the Warsaw Pact, right? So basically, it was a bipolar world. So two poles of influence, two sovereign poles, and they were both truly sovereign, the United States and the Soviet Union, well, because of MAD, right? The mutually assured destruction. Both of them had massive amounts of nuclear weapons, and both have their sphere of influence. And you had proxy wars, like Vietnam, for example, I would say was a proxy war between the Soviet Union and the United
And the
States.
United States and
Right, which is,
Afghanistan. I mean, like
Afghanistan was
Afghanistan
another
was
one.
always
Right,
right.
exactly. So, well, if you have such powers with nuclear weapons, usually they never fight directly against each other because it could escalate into a nuclear conflict, and nobody wants this, of course. That's why you have proxy wars instead, right? Where you basically pretend that it's like America fighting the North Vietnamese, right? When it's not like really the North Vietnam was not a sovereign entity, right? It was completely dependent on the Soviet Union. I mean, it's the same in Ukraine now. I mean, Ukraine has been a proxy war between the United States and the Russian Federation, basically, where the United States is basically just using the Ukrainian army as sort of like battering ram, basically, against Russia. I mean, I would say this is not really a secret. I mean, a lot of people are saying this. And I think the fact, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here, but
No, it's all right.
Yes, I mean the fact that after Trump started his second administration, the negotiations started in Saudi Arabia, and first it was just the United States, like Marco Rubio and some other guys, and representatives of the Russian Federation. Ukraine was not involved. No European country was involved. It was literally just the US negotiating with Russia about ending the conflict in Ukraine. And that, of course, was very telling because these are the only two actors that actually matter, right? Nobody cares really what Ukraine says or the Europeans say because they're not really behind it. Yes.
Yeah.
So the only two entities that can really end this conflict are the U.S. and Russia, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think it's and I don't think this is a secret. I mean, if you look at people who've written about this seriously, they say this was, Putin drew a line in the sand about NATO, and they crossed the line, and that was pretty much that's the reason for it. I don't think that's. I don't think that's
it's not even controversial.
Yeah.
Honest, right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, even Trump and J.D. Vance, they themselves hinted at this many times. Yes, that it was pretty much the previous administration's fault, right? And they're sort of trying to rectify this somehow.
Yeah.
So,
sorry. No, go ahead.
So I just wanted to finish this real quick about the multipolarity thing, about the bipolar world.
Yeah. Why don't you define a little bit more what exactly the ideology of multipolarity is?
Right. So to go back to where it started, so in 1945, after 1945, you had a bipolar world, United States versus the Soviet Union. Then in the early 90s, the Soviet Union collapsed and ceased to exist, basically. And that's when you had a unipolar world, because the Soviet Union broke up into different states: Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Belarus, etc. So all of them became independent states. The largest state that was formerly a part of the Soviet Union was the Russian Federation, of course, but it was severely weakened economically after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Was pretty much an economic basket case, and the West, especially the United States, took advantage of the Russian Federation, wanted to exploit basically their resources, wanted to control the Russian economy for their own end. Yes, they sent all these advisors from America to Boris Yeltsin, but not really to help the Russian people, but to enrich the elites in America and the West as a whole. And that's when you had a unipolar world, right? Because you had America not just as a superpower, but as a hyperpower. I mean, the difference between a hyperpower and a superpower is a hyperpower is unchallenged, basically. Superpower usually have challengers. Like when you had a bipolar world, you had two superpowers, Soviet Union and United States. Then starting in the early 90s, you only had one hyperpower, which was the United States, could pretty much do whatever it wanted, and nobody could challenge it, really, right? I mean, it could just invade countries left and right with impunity. No matter what the UN said, and no matter how much the Europeans complained, it didn't really matter. But now I think all of this is changing, and it's visibly changing. And I think even people in the West and the United States are waking up to this fact that America is not the hyperpower anymore that it used to be. And there are other powers on the planet now, other poles that are challenging America's supremacy, and I would say successfully. And since we're talking about Ukraine, that's a very good example. I mean, if Ukraine is a proxy war between the US and the Russian Federation, I mean, who's winning this proxy war? It's not the US, in my opinion. Yes, I think Russia is clearly winning this conflict because they will, in my opinion, I mean, my prediction is they will pretty much get what they want. And again, this will prove that the Russian Federation is a sovereign pole in a new multipolar world. So I would define a pole as a civilization state, which is basically a more technical term for empire. Yes, and because an empire, it differs from a nation state in that it has a much larger territory and it encompasses many different cultures under sort of like umbrella, so to speak, like the Roman Empire, for example. And I would also argue that the United States is a civilization state. It's an imperial structure, basically, because usually empire is always multicultural, multi-confessional, multi-ethnic by nature. I mean, you always have like some sort of like what the Germans used to call Reichsvolk, which is like the imperial people. Yeah, which is like the imperial people. Yes, means the people that founded the empire.
Yeah,
yes?
the Volk. Yeah, right. The Volk, which is funny that the only person I ever saw who did this is James Lindsay, who everybody hates now, but he had a great thing a while back about the word folk. Volkswagen. The Hitler term or the Nazi term Volk. You know how, what do we say? What do the wokies say in America? They're always like, this is for regular folks. Folks just need to, this is for black folks. This is for Hispanic folks who need to, they need your help too. Just some folks. And it's the same thing. It's the same word. It's they're using it in the same context. Also, it's like this sort of blood and soil, folkish thing, and the left does it now, where they talk about the folks, right? But you're saying that a civilization state arises when from some volkish group that rises to enough power to where they're a pole in the landscape, right? That's kind of what you're saying?
Well, sort of, right? I mean, you have like a certain people, like an ethnic group, right? I mean, they gain enough power where maybe at first they subjugate other groups and they bring them into the fold. Well, like the Romans did, right? Like you had the Romans, and of course they didn't just restrict themselves to the territory around Rome, the city. They expanded massively. I mean, all the way to what is now England and North Africa. And they created what is called the Roman Empire. But the Romans themselves, as the ethnic group, I would say that they were the founding stock, right? But that doesn't mean that the other people were discriminated against, or that it was a racist construct, because it wasn't. Exactly. Right?
Yeah. No. Well, and this is where ethno-pluralism comes in, and this is a big part of your ideology, which I think we'll get to in a second. But let's wait to get to there, because that's like a little bit further down the road. So, in America, we definitely are taught this bipolar, is that what's called, bipolar? This bipolar thing. Like we're definitely taught that. Like we are taught in school that after World War II, there's two poles, and it's us and Russia, and it's mutually assured destruction, and this sort of tension is dividing the world, right? And it's like everything is in relation to this tension. But the funny thing is, our understanding in America basically has that up until fall of the Berlin Wall and collapse of the Soviet Union, at which point we don't really talk about it anymore. Like we don't then acknowledge the truth which is that, okay, then America became the only, then we have the gay era, global American empire, turbo America. And Turbo America, that's what's his name, Nicolo Soldo thing, which is, his Turbo America piece it's about like, people talk about how the American empire is failing and it's, not as powerful and blah, blah, but it's actually so powerful you can't even believe how powerful it is. It's like totally dominant, right? And so we basically enter the Turbo America era because you're right. There's nobody to challenge it. There's nobody really to challenge. I mean, we have China who takes all our manufacturing sort of from under our feet, but there's really nobody else that's a challenger in any serious way. There's no actual fear. And so I don't think Americans really understood that until maybe now. It's not like your everyday average American was thinking we are the empire of the globe, even though we basically were. So what multipolarity is saying is that era is over. And the era of America being the sole superpower, basically, through which everything else is sort of running. Multipolarity hopes that era is over. Now, of course, this is coming from Dugin, and of course Dugin hopes this, right? I mean, like, of course he wants it to be multipolarity, right? I mean, of course the interest of non-Americans is to have America not be their daddy anymore, right? Of course they want that, right? So it's a little bit wishful thinking. On the other hand, Americans don't want to be gay. We don't want to be the global American empire, as we just learned in Trump. So that's where Dugin and you are completely, I think, correct in the sense that nobody wants this. If this is what the global American empire is, nobody wants it. Nobody wants this thing that it's become. And I mean, I guess people want it in sort of a base comfort way, right? Like they want porn and Coca-Cola, and America does provide that. But really, in our hearts of hearts, we don't want this. And what's great about Dugin's ideas and your ideas is that, ironically, the most American president we've had in many decades is the one who's making it who's actually ushering in multipolarity by implementing this more isolationist perspective. Is that sort of right?
Well, I would say that's basically correct. I mean, what people have to understand, especially in the United States, is that multipolarity is not some kind of anti-American project.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
I would even argue that it is pro-American because, as you just mentioned, the American people themselves actually benefit from it. Because how do the average Americans benefit from imperial overstretch? How do they benefit from America having hundreds and hundreds of military bases in nations all across the globe, getting involved in conflicts that never threaten the security of the United States or the welfare of its people? I mean, the only people that really benefit are the elites and the weapons manufacturers, really. All of this is funded with American taxpayers' money. So basically, Americans are paying for basically the empire to continue its sort of ambitions. But in reality, the infrastructure in the United States itself is crumbling, and you have lots of issues like really a dysfunctional healthcare system, for example. You have issues in the education system, unsafe streets, and various other things that are way more important, right? I mean, for the average American, I think a lot of Americans realize this, and this is also why they voted for Trump. And Trump himself realizes this, because I think Trump is opposed to any kind of globalist organization or initiative out of principle. And a good example was when they, I don't know, dissolved USAID, because USAID is a prime example of some sort of like
Yeah.
imperialist project,
Yes. Very
which was
much,
used
very
basically, well, to exert soft power, right? To like to brainwash people overseas, but also to finance sort of opposition groups that even went on to topple governments or instigate color revolutions, all for the benefit of the American elite, basically, and their strange woke ideology
Is it
that
the? It's not
nobody.
the American elite though. That's
Well,
the thing. It's not. It's the global elite, right? I mean,
it's a global. Well, that's correct, right?
George Soros is not the American elite. You
Well,
know.
it's a good point. No, I agree. I agree. Right. Well, I would say
Um,
it is mostly a rootless cosmopolitan elite, right? If you
yeah.
want to use if you want to use the if you want to use the correct jargon, because
Careful,
even the
careful
elite
there
in
in
the US,
Germany.
right? I mean, even the elite in the
I don't
US,
think they're allowed to.
they don't feel
Uh,
connected to the people. You know what I mean?
no, and look, it's not even Jews. I mean, it's like it's not like I hate this group more than anything, and so I'm not part of them. I'm not part of the globalists. And George Soros hates Israel. So it's like, it's not, you can't, of course, they're going to say, when we say globalist, that's just code for Jews, but it's actually not at all. I would actually say, despite what the anti Semites would like to believe, this group of globalists is actually sort of less Jewish than you would think. Like, it's really more. I mean, sure, there's like gross finance stuff going on, but like the real heart and soul of it is really more of like a NGO aging WASP female kind of thing. That's who's really funding this shit. Like the people who are actually really funding globalism, it's not like Zionist Jews. I mean, the Zionist Jews like kind of are part of it, but it's some of them. But it's actually like global liberalism. That's really what this is. And the people who are funding that are these like aging, decrepit American globalist families who have gotten parasitized by, global capital, basically. And they're just giving all their money away to this like NGO class. That's really the like heart and soul behind this, in my opinion. And this is what Yarvin says. Yarvin says actually globalism. He doesn't say this exactly, but I interpret him to be saying that actually globalism is a function of the Boston Brahmin. Have you heard this?
I have
Do you know
not.
what I'm talking about? Do you know what a Boston Brahmin is?
No, not really.
Well,
Elaborate,
Boston
please.
Brahmin is like the old Boston Puritan descendant WASP class of the East, right? Like the people who founded all the Ivy League schools, that group. A fundamental part of Yarvin's ideology is that group is far left, and they always have been far left. And so that sort of genetic imprint is what has led to today, that their far leftism, which dates back to before the revolution, is actually, this is today just like a manifestation of that. America has always been sort of a far left project of these Boston Brahmin types. And I think that there's a lot to that, man. Like when you really get into those higher echelons of power, which I've caught a glimpse of occasionally in my life, you get to that crust of like, it's like this, it's waspy, but it's sort of like it's people pretending to be wasps. And they're all funding. It's like a dinner party thing. Like globalism is really a function of a dinner party that has been completely unmoored from the people of any of these nations, right? It's like they've just gussied each other up to believe the craziest shit because they've become completely disconnected from the common people, right? And that's kind of what globalism is. I mean, in my view. So hopefully multipolarity is the cure to globalism, right? But let me ask this. Why okay, what are the polls going to be, right? Because the criticism of multipolarity that I always hear is it's third worldist. So, and this is something you're very careful. You and Dugan both share this in common, which I want to actually challenge you on. You say stuff sometimes, like in your book, you say the ideology of multipolarity is profoundly anti-racist because it's ethno-pluralistic. Ethno-pluralism meaning you basically leave people alone to do their little ethnic enclaves distributed across the world. But you also don't force them together. It's like it's an opposite melting pot, right? It's like a non-melting pot. It's like a pot, but you don't melt anything. It's a soup. But why? My question is, who gives a shit if we're racist? I mean, no, I know you're not allowed to. I'm not saying let's be racist. I'm just saying, why do we fucking care? Who cares if we're racist?
Well, but that's not the point, to be honest, right? And the accusation that it's third world is absurd in my opinion, because
Okay.
if you look at the polls right now, United States is one poll, obviously. I would say the Russian Federation is one poll.
Let's look at the polls.
China is one poll, and India is one poll. And that's it right now. So you have 4 polls, like 4 true civilization states with true sovereignty, because these 4 civilization states, United States, Russia, China, and India, are imperial structures. They're all multi-ethnic, multi-confessional, and all of them have nuclear weapons, which is very important. So, I mean, for example, Islam is not a pole, right? I mean, it's a civilization. You can talk about Islamic civilization, but it's not a pole because it's not unified in a state and it's not sovereign. It's fractured and it doesn't possess nuclear weapons, right? So maybe they will be able to unify at some point in the future, right? Might be very difficult. And I think other poles will emerge, maybe in South America. But right now, I think it's 4 poles, like 4 true civilization states. And well, the reason I'm mentioning racism is because I think in the end, I'm not moralizing or anything. I just think like the whole globalist enterprise is basically just a continuation of the whole notion of white supremacism that started maybe in the 19th century or even earlier, right? When you had the British Empire colonizing peoples all across the globe and trying to bring them the blessings of Western civilization, basically, because they viewed these peoples as quote unquote savages. Well,
liberals. Liberals are the real racists. And this would go very much back to Yarvin, which is, like actually the liberal project. Guy, we keep saying fucking project. Why do we say project? What the fuck does that mean? Project. No. The liberal project is fundamentally like about it's actually the racist thing, and it's eugenic. Right, and it's colonial, and they play all this lip service, but actually it's about total control of the minority classes, basically. And yeah, I think there's a lot to that for sure. But this is going to be a good conversation, I can tell, because there's a nagging thread here that I think people on our side do take issue with multipolarity, which is that. Okay, so we're talking about the polls, right? First of all, does Dugan say India is a poll?
Yeah, well, he does, right? He said, I think he says it's more like an emerging poll because it is not as powerful as the other 3, but yes, he considers it a poll.
Emerging. Right. Yeah. So I actually asked Dugan this. I can't remember exactly what his response was, but he also says, "Oh, Africa's going to be a poll," right? And look, I am an ethno-pluralist in the sense that I agree that the policy on the ground should be to basically leave groups alone. You should basically let people do what they want. That's what America is about. Let the black people figure it out for themselves. Let all the different groups figure it out for themselves. That's not our responsibility. The whole point is to provide sort of a rough playing field for people to do their thing. but we don't intervene and we don't force outcomes, right? I completely agree with that. The problem is that when you do that, we have what's happening in Africa now, which is Africa's not going to be a pole. Like, no offense. I love black people, but Africa's not going to be a pole. It's not going to happen. I mean, like maybe hundreds of years down the line, they'll figure out some way to do their own thing in such a way where they do become a pole. But if we're talking about a pole being, technocratic weapon power, it's just not going to happen in Africa. We know that. And I'm not trying to be racist. I'm just saying it's just the fact of life. And so, what do you do about that? You can't not everybody's going to become a pole. And then the Chinese get in there, and what's happening now? China's like, all right, well, Africa's ours now. The whites the West got guilted out of being there, which is fine, but now the Chinese own it. It's like, so, okay, what do you do about peoples that are not going to become a pole?
Well, they will be integrated into other poles, obviously, because you still have to live according to the Darwinist principle, basically, the survival of the fittest. I mean, it's not some kind of hippie world, the multipolar world. Right. And I tend to agree with you that it will be very difficult for Africa to become a pole, if ever, right, because of the tribal nature of the peoples living there.
Right.
Because the only way,
bad. It's just
right. Yeah. No. It's just the way it is, right? And I'm not. The only way for Africa to become a pole would be to implement Pan-Africanism, basically, where they unite into one entity. But I find this very difficult, again, because of these tribal differences and animosities in Africa. I mean, they're starting to sort of, quote unquote, decolonize now, by kicking out the French, for example, and also limiting American influence in Africa. But as you said, now the Chinese are moving in, and the Russians are also present on the African continent. But I mean, like I said, it's not a moral judgment. It's just the way it is, right? Because it's a vacuum, basically. If you have a power vacuum, somebody's going to move in immediately, especially if it's not a sovereign entity. And if you don't have nuclear weapons, you're not a sovereign entity. So somebody else will move in and will exert control over you, whether directly or indirectly, economically, politically, militarily.
And then, right. And then where are we at? Then we're sort of almost right back. Like, we can't just wait for everybody to become a pole. And then it's going to be back to, this is why I worry about the language of profound anti-racism, because as soon as you start hanging yourself on that hook, then flash forward to the future, oh crap, the African pole has been subverted by the Russian pole because the Russian pole didn't want the Chinese to get their hands on the African pole. And then, okay, well, how profoundly anti-racist are you? Because now you're just enslaving the Africans yet again, right?
Right. Yeah, but I think right, but I think you're talking about a multipolar world which will never come into existence, where basically every people has their own pole. But nobody's saying that this has to happen. I mean, we are already in a multipolar world. I mean, based on the fact that there are more than two poles. As soon as you have more than two poles, then you have a multipolar world. I mean, even three poles would be multipolar, right? Because you had unipolar, bipolar, now you have multipolar. And nobody can deny that China is a pole and that Russia is a pole. And I don't think the United States can dictate China what to do completely 100%. It doesn't fly anymore. And obviously the same is the case with Russia. I mean,
the United States.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, the United States cannot intimidate. Russia is not going to be intimidated by the United States. And I mean, no country in the world has been bombarded with as many sanctions as Russia in all of human history, right? And they did not succeed in tanking the Russian economy. It's actually doing quite well, as a matter of fact. And even militarily, they're not going to be defeated anytime soon. And the same is true of China, I think. I mean, if there's ever going to be a conflict between the US and China, I'm not sure who's going to win or how it will end, right? Over Taiwan.
I think my sense, I mean, I love America, and obviously I will mow down as many Chinese as I can in the name of America. But At the same time, I don't think we win that. I think we lose that like badly right now
Well,
because we're just so cucked. But
right.
anyway, sorry, keep going.
Well, sorry, no, I was just going to make the point that you have a kind of multipolar world, but like I said, it doesn't have to be like a multipolar world without conflict and without war. Flower power multipolar world. It can be because a multipolar world can be brutal, right? It can be a brutal world because you have these empires, civilization states. They're still going to have conflicts of interest. They're going to compete for resources. But the benefit is of having a multipolar world, you have different perspectives and different civilizational paths, not just one imposed on all the world, which was the case in the unipolar age, where basically liberalism and the woke nonsense was forced on everybody, whether they wanted it or not. But now it's different because I think the majority of the world rejects liberalism. They reject wokeism, like the LGBTQ nonsense,
Yes.
the transgender
Most
insanity. I mean, they don't want it. They have no interest in it.
no,
I mean, even in the United States, it's basically being rejected by the majority of the people.
and I love it's my favorite issue because I was at AM Fest, which I've talked about, and I listened to which issues the people clapped for the most, and it's none of the things the right leadership wants, and it's none of the things the left leadership wants. The number one thing is the trans thing. That's what people clap the most. That's what they really cheer for the most because it's so. And I feel the same way, dude. And everybody's like, "Why do you care?" I still get messages on Instagram being like, "Why do you care, man?" And it's like, I care because I have two daughters and they're about to go to fucking school. That's why I care. Some fucking asshole's gonna say to them, "Oh, you're a boy." The second they say something weird, like that's fucking nightmare fuel. Like, like what do you mean? Why do I care? And people really care about the shit. And it's like, to me, that was the moment, like that is the sole issue where the like the crest of the like wave broke, that's kind of like where the wave, the high watermark of global American empire, it crashed on trans. Because it's something like trans only comes around when there's too much power, right? Like too much power warps things in a very bad and damaging way. And that's what, that's the whole advantage of multipolarity is it's decentralized power is a healthy thing. Centralized power, too much, is very unhealthy. And you saw it with trans. Trans was the like rot on the peach, right? And I think that people know that. They can tell this is bad. This is not good. This is a societal disease, which it is. So yeah, I agree with you there.
Well, it's an illness, right?
It's an illness, right? It's a societal.
I mean, it's an illness because it's abnormal. It is unnatural, and I mean every sane person can see it, and I think every sane person does see it. And
well,
I think
a lot of sane people saying don't see it though, right? I mean,
I think they pretend not to see it, even though they see it anyway. Right. I mean, you cannot not see it. It's crazy to not see it and say that you don't see it. It's just weird. Well, the point is, I think there is a paradigm shift or a vibe shift, basically, away from this nonsense, this insanity. And these traditionalist societies like Russia or China, I would almost call them like archaeo-futurist societies, because they do not reject the modern world. They embrace the modern world, but they say we should not be controlled by the modern world. We should adhere to our heritage, our traditions, and employ technology for the betterment of our people, or for the glory of the empire, maybe. But the idea is that the vast majority of the world's population rejects the liberal agenda, and I also think that the majority in the U.S. of the U.S. population rejects it. I mean,
Yeah.
who really actively
I don't
supports
think
with
they
respect to-
used to.
Right.
I think that, I mean, and this is why what you're doing with multipolarity is, and I've always loved Dugan, man. I've always loved fourth political theory, and because I think he's right, but I think he's right about his fourth political theory like groundwork. But I don't think anybody would have listened to this before COVID. You know, I mean, I listened to it. I read it. I read fourth political theory as COVID was happening, which was kind of perfect. Just so people understand what fourth political theory is, it's intimately related to this theory of multipolarity, which is basically that it's called fourth political theory because the three previous political theories are liberalism, communism, and fascism. And those three theories battled it out in the 20th century, and liberalism won. And so what Dugan is saying is it's time to think after liberalism. What is the fourth thing that's going to come around and challenge liberalism? And he sort of proposes this decentralized kind of multipolar more attitude, which is about your scene, which means like your sort of being, but it's not your individual being, it's your being as it's rooted in your territory and your community. And I totally agree with all that. I think that that's really dead on. I mean, no, look, I'm an American, so fundamentally I will always live and die for America first. But I actually don't think America is necessarily this individualist project. I think I think that that's actually what America has been toxically evolved into, but I don't think that that's what it was meant to be originally. You know, like sit in your room and get your dick chopped off and like take Adderall and like that's what freedom is. Like that's not what freedom ever was meant to be. But I kind of forgot what we were talking about. What were we talking about with fourth political theory? Do you remember?
Talk about transgenderism, LGBTQ,
Oh, yeah.
the whole woke agenda.
Right. Okay. What I was saying is fourth political theory is something that I truly believe in and that Dugan telegraphed. But I think all these ideas of people don't want what America's selling, that's what you're saying. That's brand new though, dude. Like they did want America was selling for a while. Right. They wanted it, and now it just went too far. I feel.
Yeah, I think. I mean, even a large percentage of Americans don't want what America is selling anymore.
Not anymore. Right?
And that's the point. And this is where the whole idea or the notion of the vibe shift comes in, because I think it's very palpable. I mean, you can sense it, and this is why multipolarity is so important, because it broke the unipolar moment. It broke the negative imperialist imposition of anti-values on mankind, basically, including in the US itself. I think the only stronghold of liberalism left in the world, that the new headquarters is basically the European Union now, with Germany as the headquarters, I would say.
Yeah, so let's talk about Europe. Because Europe is like kind of the weird outlier here, because Europe seems to have like lost all of its power completely and is just like a total non-factor. I mean, if you'd talked about Europe in the way it's talked about today 20 years ago, people would have been shocked, because they would have been like, well, Russia's down bad, Europe is up. And Germany's manufacturing everything, and the EU's strong. Like, Europe was supposed to be the other pole, right? But then over the past 20 years, right. Over the past 20 years, Europe has just gotten totally deflated, while Russia's kind of ascended. So why did that happen to Europe? Why did it lose all its power, and why is it not like taken seriously as a pole?
Well, I don't think it ever had that much power, to be honest, ever since 1945. I mean, Germany's been occupied for 80 years, basically. And you have tons of American soldiers, American bases on German soil still today. It's an American vassal state, obviously, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
With no real say in anything that actually matters. I think this.
Yeah,
I think.
but isn't that new? Like that's not that. That's not
Yeah,
like.
I think it's. I don't think it's new. I mean, it's. I think with Germany, it's been like this since 1945. To be honest, I think the only semi-sovereign country in the European Union is France, and only because it has nuclear weapons. Like no other EU country has nuclear weapons. Like there are nuclear weapons on German soil, but they're owned by the Americans, and only the Americans have access to them. So I mean, Germany does not have nuclear weapons, therefore it is not a sovereign country. Uh, None of the other EU states are sovereign countries except France, right? Well,
Yeah.
Britain has nuclear weapons, but Britain is a special case, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, European Union is precisely not a pole because it is not truly sovereign. And if you're not sovereign, you're not a pole. And if you don't have nuclear weapons, you cannot be sovereign. And I mean, it's quite obvious that Germany destroyed its own economy at the behest of the American government. I mean, you have the conflict in Ukraine. Germany did not have to get ideologically involved in this conflict. It wasn't really forced to take sides, but it did, right? So it said, well, Russia is the aggressor. Ukraine was attacked. Therefore, we are going to put sanctions on Russia. I mean, like all the other European countries did, like America did. Yes. So they sanctioned Russia. The sanctions did not really hurt the American economy much, but it severely hurt the German economy because the Germans decided, well, we will just refuse to import Russian gas, right? But Russian
Mhm.
gas was very, very cheap. And it was absolutely crucial for the German economy, for the German industry, because without Russian gas, the energy prices like skyrocket, and it ruined like whole sectors of the German economy. Like Volkswagen, for example, had to close down a whole bunch of plants. They're all moving out of Germany, and there's no real end in sight to this plight. And because of this, well, another issue is the green madness, basically, because Germany is obsessed with like the whole green ideology, save nature, everything has to be ecologically sound.
Mhm.
So not only did they stop importing Russian gas, they also shut down their nuclear power stations almost at the same time, right? So I
Right.
mean, it's like it's I have no words for this. Well, I mean, what can you really say? So the economy was devastated basically, and it's hardly going to recover and be as strong as it was before,
Mhm.
ever, right? And it's basically committing suicide economically.
Yeah, it's dying. I mean, you really get that sense.
Oh,
Everywhere
it
in
is.
Western Europe, we did
It's a
this.
stench of death and
I,
decay,
yeah,
basically.
I can't
Really.
remember. This was probably before your time, but you didn't come to Urbit in Portugal, did you? The Urbit
I don't know
thing.
what it is. What is that?
Okay, never mind. We did we did an event in Portugal for Urbit a while ago, and everybody was so excited to go to Portugal. Yeah, oh, well, we're going to what's the fucking place even called? Not Porto. What's the other one? Lisbon. It's Lisbon. There's a growing tech community in Lisbon, which I thought there was supposed to be some growing tech community. You show up in friggin' Lisbon, and my friend Sean Monahan put it perfectly. He's like, everywhere we went, we got like a noise complaint. Literally every restaurant, we're getting a noise complaint, and even in like popular like young people restaurants, that people are, can you just please keep it down? Like, please, can you keep it down? Like every party we had in like an apartment, people were like, yelling at us, and it's like it's just dying. It's a dying. It's a place where people's like childless aunts, are just dying in federally subsidized apartments, and they just want to be quiet. They just want it to be quiet while we're dying. Just let us die. Just let us die in our apartment. Please don't make any noise. And it's just dead, man. It's a dead, and you get that feeling all over Western Europe. I mean, there's exceptions. Of course, London is great, Paris is great. It always will be. But like, you really do get the sense that this thing, it's like it's rotting. It's like rotting and dying, and it's like it's weird. I feel like people used to be very excited by Europe. You know, it was like Europe, ooh. Whereas now people are just like, ugh, Europe. Ugh,
Well, I don't know. I couldn't agree more. I agree 100% with your assessment. And well, another thing is, I think the European establishment, like the people who are still in charge of the Europe. I mean, when I talk about Europe, by the way, I specifically refer to Western Europe and the European Union, and I exclude like Eastern Europe or even Central Europe, because it's completely different there. In some ways, it's the opposite, right? Well, the fact is that you don't have freedom of speech either, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I mean, you have like severe draconian anti-speech laws in pretty much all European countries, including Britain and Canada, like your northern neighbor as well. Like, I just read a poll the other day that said that like 40% of Germans are afraid to voice their opinion in public. Because of possible legal repercussions. I mean, that in itself is telling. Yes, I mean, I myself, when I'm on a podcast, like right now, I cannot speak freely. Yes, I mean, there are certain things I would say if I could say them, but if I did say them, I might get into trouble, right, with the German law. Yes, because I'm still a German citizen, so I have to adhere to the laws. Right. I mean, even if I say certain things while I'm in America, I can still be prosecuted in Germany for them. So and that's how
but that's always. I mean, Europe has never had freedom of speech, though, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, no, never. Well, I would say Germany. The only time it truly had freedom of speech was probably in the Weimar Republic.
Right.
Yeah, I think Weimar Republic was quite free. Yeah,
although, well, no, you couldn't criticize Jews. There was you could in some places, but I've read accounts of judges. You can't say that you could go to jail or.
I didn't say it was unlimited freedom of speech, but
it was more
definitely freer than what you have now. I mean, that what you had before or what you had since, right?
Yeah.
Because right now there's zero freedom of speech in Germany, and anybody who says something different is basically lying. It's pretty obvious. And it's not just Germany, it's also the other European countries. And this, I think, contributes to what you described earlier, to this sort of stifling, oppressive atmosphere, because it's like a mixture of a Kafka and Orwell novel, basically. It's like living in Kafka's castle and Orwell's in Orwell's 1984, basically. I mean, that's really what it feels like to me, even, when I walk around, like interact here. It is like, I don't feel free. I feel constantly like under pressure, so to speak. And a lot of people, I think, feel the same way. And a lot of people are dissatisfied. I mean, this is why the AfD is the strongest party in Germany, according to polls right now. I think 26%, the Christian Democratic Union at 24%. Because people are not happy with how things are going, right? But then at the same time, you don't really have democracy in Europe either. So if these sort of patriotic, like maybe you could call them like the German MAGA parties, like the AfD, like come too close to power, the establishment will always find ways to shut them down. I mean, they just did it not so long ago in Romania with Ceausescu, who was poised to win the second round of the presidential election there.
And then they canceled
They just canceled it because of what they claimed was Russian interference on TikTok.
God. Right? So who's in charge of this though? Like who is doing this? Like we know.
I think it's the people in Brussels. I think it's the European. The technocrats in Brussels, basically. I think that make these decisions. I think before the Trump administration, they did it together with the Biden administration. I think because they work closely together. I would say that the Brussels people and the Biden people. I mean, the Democrats in the United States, they're like best buddies, of course, obviously, with Soros and so on. I think they all conspired to basically have total liberal control. But now, of course, Trump pretty much messed up everything because he's a disturbing factor and they don't know how to deal with it. And they're freaking out to some extent. I mean, but it's not working anymore. It's completely different, like the feeling, because during Trump's first term, like the hysteria, I mean, even among the populace was much, much worse than it is now. because I think a lot more people are actually dissatisfied themselves, so they're not as vocally anti-Trump as they used to be in the past. I think the same is the case in the United States, to be honest. You don't really see this like anti-Trump hysteria anymore, at least not to the same extent as you saw in the first administration.
No, not at all. I mean,
Right.
they've accepted it, and they've,
Well, that's my point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was at the inauguration in DC in January, and I was wearing the MAGA hat, the dark MAGA hat, like everywhere, like by myself on the metro. Like nobody bothered me at all, ever. Right. So
yeah, I wore my MAGA hat out once in LA recently, and nobody cared. I mean,
Yeah.
people care, but what's interesting, I think that's happening. There's this. I've talked about this elsewhere, but the least liberal place in a lot of ways right now is like San Francisco and LA and New York. Like those places. I have my cousin is a little cub reporter for something up in San Francisco, and was working on a whole piece of how like the anti-wokeification of San Francisco. Now there's all these enclaves in San Francisco that are like anti-woke bros and stuff. We certainly have that in LA, and New York already did this whole thing with Times Square. Like actually the furthest, most urbane cities have actually become the place where you can be the least liberal in the old sense, and particularly with gender dynamics, man. I mean, you see here, all the girls want to date, a thought criminal. Have you seen the numbers? It is the most insane thing ever. Have you seen the voting numbers of the younger generations?
Actually, I have.
So yes, so it's like 22 to 27 is still leans 6% to the liberals. Younger than that, 22 to 18 is like 20% to the right.
Yeah.
Which is fucking wild. Like that has got to drive the people on the left absolutely out of their minds, because they're just like, what? We're supposed to be the young cool, like we're the younger people, like we're Obama. Like that's got to make them absolutely insane. And
well, it's the same phenomenon you have in Europe, though, right? I mean,
is that what's happening in Europe too?
Well, same statistics, like with the AfD, for example, in the last election, was basically the boomers, actually the boomer generation, the pensioners, basically that vote for the established parties, basically established parties, meaning the parties that brought about the misery that we live in now, basically. But the young people, the large percentage of young people are voting for the AfD because I think they're the ones that have to live in a society that the boomers created and they aren't liking it.
Yeah. So yeah, no, exactly. And it's just so funny because it's like this whole paradigm is just so new, and it's great. I mean, it's amazing. It's like the young kids they're like, no, we're not gonna eat this bullshit. Like, especially the young guys, they're like, fuck this. And you see it really palpably, like the girls want a guy who is not a cuck. The younger people, like, they love it. They fucking, you should see these parties in LA. I mean, makes me uncool for saying this, but which I am. But like, the cool people who do have parties, which is no longer me. It's crazy. Like I go to these things. It's like, where do they get these girls from? It's like, where are they manufacturing these like young right-leaning e-girls? And it's all just because it's like forbidden, it's like the forbidden thing. And it's great. I mean, it's so great. It's like, honestly, the best thing ever to watch. But it leaves the question open of like, where do these people evolve? Like, once they start getting older, what do they become? Are they going to stay right wing or not? I don't really know. Okay,
well, it depends where society is going, right? We don't know where society is going. Like, if you want to talk about the multipolar world again, so if you talk about the West, I think the West, like Western civilization, in my opinion, has two poles right now. It is the United States, and it is the Russian Federation, because I think these two poles are the only poles that are truly upholding actual Western values and want to safeguard and protect the West against its enemies. I mean, I don't see this in the European Union at all, right? I mean, the European Union, in my opinion, is doing everything to subvert true Western values, and it is actively facilitating the destruction of its own Western heritage. So, United States, Russia, the last defenders of Western civilization.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the rise of Trump and Trump being like a cog in these people's plans. But do you really think that there's plans? Like, do you really think that there's these globalists who are planning to take over the world? Like, do you think that that's actually happening?
Yeah, I do not, as a matter of fact. Like, I do not really believe there's such a conspiracy, because I think it's just a natural evolution of ideology. And I also believe that the majority of people on the left, or on the globalist side, like Soros, or I don't know, Biden, Kamala Harris, all these people, I think they truly believe that they're the good guys, and what they're doing for the benefit of mankind.
I think
So
that's
I don't think that George Soros views himself as some kind of Blofeld James Bond villain, right? I mean, I think he truly thinks he's the good guy, and so do all the other people. And I think not all, but I would say the majority of them are completely faithful to their own ideologies, and they completely subscribe to them. And yeah, I don't think there's any conspiracy of like some old guys in some room, like sort of manipulating world events or something like this.
well, I mean, it is. George Soros obviously is an old guy in a room
Right. Yes.
manipulating world events. But yeah,
But he's not doing it secretly, though. That's the point.
no,
He's doing
yeah.
it very openly. Right.
There are people that are doing it secretly, definitely. There's people who are, I mean, Soros just did it so much that he outed himself, but there are plenty of others that are doing it that we don't know their names, and they work very hard for us not to know their names.
Well, yes, but the ideology is in the open, and the plans, I mean, how they want to change society, it's in the open. They're not trying to hide it at all, in my opinion.
Right. It's right, but it's true. I think that you are right. Somebody's saying Soros referred to himself as a god. Yeah, there's this really weird Soros quote where he said, like, I started thinking of myself as God, and I've had to learn to not think that way over time. And it's like, whoa, dude. And it's like, oh yeah, you're a god, Soros, because you figured out some like financial cheating mechanism because you just like are smarter than other people. Like, yeah, that doesn't make you a god, dude. It just makes you a fucking parasite, which, we all are at some level. But yeah, I think you're totally correct that they don't think of it this way. I don't think Larry Fink is sitting around thinking, I'm trying to take over the world on behalf of myself. I think Larry Fink is a smart finance guy who goes to dinner parties, and it's a dinner party thing. The dinner party thing, it just pushes ever so slightly, always leftward. And when it's unchecked, it just got way too far. It just went way too far, and it just got warped and weird and gross and like not good. And this is all a massive contraction against that march. The question is how, like, okay, so let's say we want to go towards multipolarity. We've got Trump. We've got the global nationalism, which is, of course, an oxymoron, but that's sort of what multipolarity is saying. How do we make this a reality? How do we make it so that the dinner party people understand the value of decentralization and don't want to chop their own dicks off anymore? How do we get them to do that?
Yeah, I don't think we have to do anything. I think it's just a natural progression of events, right? I mean, you have. I mean, the ideal scenario for me would be you have a MAGA America right now with a true MAGA administration. the problem I see with the American system is that it is bipolar, but in a clinical sense, right? Almost like it's schizophrenic. Because the problem is you have Trump now, like 4 years.
So many good puns about poles,
Everything,
polar,
yeah,
bipolar. Yeah, that's right.
sorry, everything's great, wonderful. You have the vibe shift and all that stuff. But as soon as something happens to the economy, a lot of people are not going to vote for another Republican again. They're going to vote for the Democrat because they'll think he'll fix the economy. So I mean, there's a probability that the next president will be a Democrat, and if that is the case, then the Democrat president, the next one, will undo almost everything that Trump and the MAGA administration has achieved. I find this very problematic, yes, because then we're back at square one. So the only way would be for MAGA to become dynastic. So if they find some kind of way to, I mean, not 100%, but to ensure that there's some kind of continuity. Yes, maybe Vance as 48, for example, would be ideal in my opinion. So, because if the United States becomes more conservative and more MAGA, but on a permanent basis, Europe will eventually follow, right? Because I mean, the United States is still the most important country in the West. No matter what you think about it, it's just a fact. And usually, what happens in the United States will always happen in Western Europe, usually with a delay of 5 to 10 years. I mean, with trends and everything else. So, I mean, if you can sustain MAGA America for like a decade or 2 decades, I think liberal Europe will also fall, and it will follow basically America's lead eventually.
So what'll happen to Europe?
I think it will just become one unified pole, the United States, and well, say it was a conservative United States, a conservative Europe, will become the West again. It will be one pole, basically, the West, because it will be closely allied. Basically, it will see its. I mean, the population of the people of the European Union or Western Europe and the peoples in North America, like Canada, United States, will see themselves as members of the same civilization because they share the same heritage, the same background, and essentially the same values. So, I mean, this could be the pole in the West, basically.
Okay, but so how does each nation, like, we had Martin Sellner on here. Sellner's great, and he's all about, Austrian identity and things like that. So how, in a multipolar Europe, how distinct are each country? Is it total Austria? Is it total Germany? Like, how does that work?
Well, it will be much better because the age of nation states is completely obsolete, because identities cannot be protected in a nation state. A nation state, by definition, is a universalizing construct, because it always wants to erase local identities. It wants all identities to conform to the national identity, right? Thereby disregarding different local identities within the nation. So the only way to overcome this, to protect true identities, because nation states are always artificial. I mean, they only really emerged with the French Revolution. They're not real natural constructs. I think the solution is empire, of course. You have a civilization state, and in the civilization states, you have different regions, and all these regions will have complete autonomy, basically, to live their lives as they see fit, with their language, their culture, their traditions, etc. And this has always been the case, or with empires, starting with the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. I mean, even to some extent in the Ottoman Empire. And well, now if you look at the Russian Federation, you have the same. You have like autonomous republics, like Tatarstan is basically a Muslim autonomous republic. Same with Chechnya. You have the Buddhists in Russia, and they're pretty much all left alone to do their own thing. But like the Roman Empire, all they have to do is they have to pay their respects to the emperor, basically. But other than that, they can do whatever they want. So empire is the answer, basically, to protect true identities. And this is where the world is heading anyway, in my opinion.
Okay, but then why can't it just be the global American empire protecting identities? Because that's certainly the argument that it makes. It's lying, but it's said like there's a reason why they use the rainbow flag, right? Or in all their iconography. Have you ever seen like when Charles Schwab, when Chuck Schwab, what the fuck is it?
Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab. When Klaus Schwab, I'm a Charles Schwab bank member. When when he's talking, it's like behind him, it's like a ring of dots that are different colors.
Yeah, I've
And
seen it. Right.
that iconography is obviously in their mind. Again, they're thinking exactly what you're thinking. They're thinking we need to be the global American empire to ensure that all these little communities are protected. This is what This is the fake excuse between USAID. The women who work at USAID, who go in there every day, and they're horrible Karens, manager class people, they don't go in there thinking I'm a colonist and I'm an imperialist, which is what they are, but they don't think that in their minds. They think, oh, the atheists of Nepal are being beaten up by the Buddhists. And it's, as an American, it's on us to make sure those atheists are not being boiled alive by the Buddhists, because that's what we do. We protect individual groups, etc. They think they're doing that already. So what is going to be the difference? And I have an answer. I think it's all in Decene, right? Which I really wanted to ask you about Decene. But what is the difference in the way that the global American empire has protected the decentralized groups under its patronage empire versus the way that the multipolar world will hopefully do it differently?
Well, the difference is that what you're describing with the global American empire is basically just a continuation of Rudyard Kipling's White Man's Burden, basically, right? Because you had the British Empire in the 19th century. You had Rudyard Kipling, who's famous for having written Jungle Book. He also wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden, in which he talked about the fact that the white man basically has the duty, the obligation to go to foreign lands and civilize the savage, basically, and bring justice and the light of Western truth to the dark continents. And I think, well, you have the same exact mentality with global American imperialism, like you just described, like USAID, like we have to intervene in Afghanistan because they don't have gay rights, or women don't have equal rights in Afghanistan. But this, of course, is not what multipolarity is all about. And this is not true diversity, because the global American empire wants to homogenize the world. They want to make the whole world like America, and they want the whole world to follow the ideology of human rights and the ideology or the dogma of capitalism, democracy, etc. Even if the people don't want it, right? Like, I would even argue that in Afghanistan today, with the Taliban in power, that the majority of Afghans, from what I've read, they actually support the Taliban, and they're quite happy to live under Taliban rule, including the women. Yes, and so who are we to impose our ways on them? I mean, this is not how you protect identities. If you want to go back to the question that you raised earlier, how do we protect national or even ethnic identities? Well, you protect them by giving them as much autonomy as possible, but not independence, of course.
But
right?
You're going to need a rule, man.
That's my point. That's my point. You can give them autonomy, but not independence, because you can only be independent if you are truly sovereign. So if you're not truly sovereign, you have to be under somebody's rule.
But that's going to come with, it's going to come with something.
No. Yeah, well, it will come with the obligation to be loyal to the empire, but it will give you the freedom to pursue your own way of life, basically. I mean, that's how it's always been with empires in the past as well.
But what's the ideological, like, you're okay in America, freedom of association, right? That's been totally lost. There's a reason that it's been lost, because legally it doesn't mean exactly what people think it means. But America, in my mind, is the thing you're talking about. It is basically a empire of decentralization. It's the first time that that's ever occurred. It's an empire that's saying, our job is to provide you with a sort of free range playing field where you are allowed to buy the fruit of your labor, buy the fruit of your ideology, yada, yada, yada. You are allowed to build your little community the way that you see fit. That's basically what the American experiment is saying. That worked really fucking well for a while. Unfortunately, after the death of Kennedy and even before that, that whole experiment, particularly in the Civil Rights Act and Hart-Celler, it got kind of manipulated and changed to be about a guarantee of individual liberty. So that guarantee of individual liberty subsumed the guarantee of freedom of association. It became more important that black guy can get a job in Georgia, or hey, let's look at an example where we all resonate with, can go get a meal in Georgia, right? Like, say that this is a big part of why the law did this way. There would be a black trucker driving through Georgia. He's a black trucker. He's driving from state to state. The idea, even though it was fake because it was lawfare, but the reason why the law developed as it did is because he would get a bunch of, ACLU lawyers to sue Georgia to be like, well, he's just driving through. He can't get a meal anywhere because he's black. How can he conduct an interstate commerce as a black guy driving through Georgia? That's not fair. His individual rights are being trampled upon. And then suddenly, what do you have? Fast forward 50 years, 60, 70 years, you have mandated hiring and you have to serve everybody. You have to pay for people to have trans surgery, because otherwise you are infringing upon their individual liberty. Right?
Well, it's a cult of individualism. It's closely connected to the cult of human rights, right?
Yes.
And basically, you have to fight this cult.
You have to fight the cult.
You have to eventually get rid of this cult completely. The whole notion of individualism as an ideology has to be gotten rid of, in my opinion. The same with the whole notion of human rights, because humans don't inherently have rights, that for no reason at all. I mean, they have an obligation, they have a duty, and they're maybe given certain rights, but they don't have like intrinsic rights, in my opinion. And it is this dogma of human rights, basically, and the dogma of individualism that has dominated Western society for decades, and not just the United States, but also Western Europe. And this is what they want to impose on the rest of the world, because they're always saying like the rights of, gay individuals in Saudi Arabia are being violated, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And that gives them an excuse to actually dominate the world, which is what they've done. But again, if we're going to do this multipolar style, which I agree with and I want to do, the same problem is going to present itself, in the sense that there's going to be conflicts on the ground. And unfortunately, the global American empire fucked up by making it so that those conflicts come down to the rights of the individual. And ultimately, that won. That beat fascism. It beat communism, because people are hedonistic pieces of shit who want to go be gay, and they want to go do drugs, and they want to go do porn, and they want to eat McDonald's, and they don't want to be bothered, right? I mean, the human beings are actually very susceptible to hedonic individualism. It's like the best thing for them, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, I want to go do whatever the fuck I want. That's how people are built that way. So that's why liberalism functions and worked so well for a while. If we're going to do the other version of it, maybe let me just ask you this. I think it all comes down to this notion of the Dasein, because the Dasein is not the individual. The Dasein is something else. So if we're going to build multipolarity, I think it comes down, the default priority is around this idea of a Dasein. So can you just tell us, we only have 10 minutes left here, but tell us what a Dasein is, because you have a chapter in your book about it, and how does that relate to multipolarity?
Well, it's Dasein is being there.
Sorry,
It
Dasein.
doesn't matter. Anyway, Dasein, da is there, sign is to be. So it's basically being there. It's a term coined by Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher, and it was later appropriated by Alexander Dugin. So originally, Dasein meant, in the Heideggerian sense, that a human has to realize that his existence is finite, meaning that he's going to die. And only through this realization can the human truly feel liberated to do what he truly wants to do, or what he's truly meant to do, by overcoming basically the illusion of some kind of eternity. Yes. And Dugin, basically, Alexander Dugin, the Russian philosopher, whom you've also interviewed recently, he basically applied the notion of Dasein, of being there, not just to individuals, but to, I would say, ethnic groups, to peoples, by saying that each ethnic group basically also has a Dasein, has a way of being in the world which is unique to itself, basically. And you as an individual are always a member of a particular ethnic group, whether you like it or not. It's irrelevant. It's just a fact, right? And you can only realize your individual ambitions by being part or through this group that you are a member of. And therefore, the group is more important than the individual, because an individual cannot survive without the group, but the group can very well survive without one particular individual. And that's why the protection of the group has to be of paramount importance, and not the sort of satisfying of the individual, basically.
Yeah, I so agree with this. I completely, I'm like completely, so the sign comes from Heidegger. I'm completely Heideggerian in my belief in this. I totally agree. And the way I see it, and this is Dugin too, I'm not really that, I mean, no shock to anybody, I'm really not a very advanced political thinker. But the one thing I do believe in is this, in the sense of like philosophical grounding for geopolitics. I really do think that the thing that's missing, and Bap writes about this. I mean, Bap's book, he's got that chapter about the spider that's like so related to its surroundings that evolutionarily couldn't even explain it. But it's like the spider and its habitat are not really separable, right? It's like, and we pretend that they're separable, and people are like that too. Like Indian people, it's not just that there's like Indian people that are these blank slates, and then there's India that they just happen to be in, and then there's Indian food that just happens to be something that they make, and you can just sort of separate these things and mix and match them, and like, oh, Indian food in this place is the same thing as there, and an Indian person in UK is just an English person. They're just English. They're the same thing. It just depends on where they are, and culture is just this superficial thing that kind of exists on the outside. I completely disagree with that. And
well, it's obviously not true. Yeah. I mean, nobody really believes that, because I mean, I've been to England countless times, and I have lots of Indian friends in England, and I don't think, I mean, they all have British passports and they're all citizens, but none of them would actually say that they're actually English. I mean, they still, even after generations, practice their own traditions, their own culture, with their own cuisine, their own literature, their own, social gatherings, movies, and so on. Yes, I think the same is true everywhere. I mean, Los Angeles, where you live, is the same, right?
LA is interesting because
similar, though, right? Well, you have Koreatown, Chinatown, I mean, you have all these ethnic neighborhoods where people basically stick to their own, right? So it's like a sort of,
It's kind of. Yeah,
well,
yes. I mean,
sort of.
that's true, but it's also LA is actually like the weird, freakish version of this. I think actually LA is very much the city of the future. I think that like most cities, most like big, great world cities will look like LA in like 100 years. And I
Completely
think
agree.
LA, if somebody can get control of it and take it out of the hands of these ridiculous communists that don't have a clue, LA could be a really, really, really great place. It could be the greatest city in the world, but it's the leadership is so bad, and there's nobody here that has been able to like bring in a Renaissance era of LA. LA's never had a Renaissance era at all, and nobody's ever taken control. I mean, it's brand new. It's so new, so it's like it's gonna take a while, but in any case, no, you're totally right. It's like people form these enclaves and they form these, like, you know, people criticize Jewish people all the time, right? And people criticize me, and they say, "Oh, well, you maybe aren't bad, but you're like a beaver who is in a." You're a beaver in a hallway, and what does a beaver do in a hallway? It starts to make a dam, right? And like a Jewish person, maybe they don't want to be Jewy, but they're gonna be because ultimately you're, just in that direction. And I believe it. I think they're right. I mean, I don't think that means that all Jews are evil, but we have in each people has an inclination, and that inclination is not separable from your environment. It's something that's built in, and
Absolutely.
I think,
Right.
and I think that's what's beautiful. I think that that's a beautiful thing. I don't think it's a terrible thing that Jews. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Basically, you need many Daseins in the world.
Right. Yeah. That's like what makes life worth living.
Well,
is
exactly.
These Daseins.
And the point is, you don't have to discriminate against the other people. Just a quick example, like in Russia, you have the two terms, like two different words. You have Ruski and Rasyanin, right? In English, they could both be translated as Russian, but there is a crucial difference because Ruski means ethnic Russian, right? And Rasyanin is just like a citizen of the Russian Federation. So when Putin speaks, like to the Russian people, he always uses the term Rasyanin, right? Because he doesn't want to exclude like the Chechens, the Tatars, etc. Yes, because they are not Ruski, they're not ethnic Russians, and they realize this because they're not stupid, right? So I mean, a Tatar would never claim that he's ethnically Russian because he's not, and neither would a Chechen. But you still have this imperial structure, which is the Russian Federation, in which everybody is equal under the law and everybody is afforded the same respect. Yes, and this is how a true empire basically functions. I mean, you have like the founding stock. In this case, it's the Ruski, the ethnic Russians that founded the empire. They're the most prominent because they're the most numerous, obviously, at 80%. I think in the United States, it would be probably the WASPs, right? The founding stock. Yes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean like you have like the Mexicans, for example, in the Southwest. I mean, they've been there for generations as well. I would consider them complete Americans, obviously, right?
Yeah. No, I mean blacks. As we've
Same.
Blacks in America. Even like I have very racially obsessed friends, and actually almost all of them say it's funny because it's like the higher IQ whites don't like the blacks. And they say, their kind of heart of hearts is like, let's keep them away. Whereas the lower IQ, or not lower IQ, but just like the more like normal, non-dork white guys, they are like, no, blacks are more American than, most of the Ellis Islanders, right? I mean, you can't say blacks aren't American, but they're certainly not, right. They're not of the founding stock. I mean, they are. They're of the founding stock. They're just a parallel founding stock. They're a parallel founding stock of this empire, right?
I would agree.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, dude, thank you so much. This was really great. Multipolarity. It's a quick read. Your style is always very fun to read. It's very sort of like a lot. It's artistic. It's not boring at all. So I would highly recommend everybody get it. And yeah, follow Arctos. Listen to your great podcast. Any other thoughts or anything?
Well, it was an excellent discussion. We covered many interesting points that are very dear to me. My Substack, Euro-Siberia, I continuously write articles about multipolarity and about the topics that we touched on today, like several times a week. And yeah, like you said, artistic, but also a factual. So
Yes.
I like to mix, basically. Yeah.
Yep. All right, man. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you. Appreciate it.